Hey everybody, welcome to my video on the Kodak Brownie number 2 Model E. This is a box camera. It has no light meter, a single shutter speed of about 1/50th of a second, 3 aperture settings, and no flash sync. This camera's target market would have been entry level and casual photographers. It is as basic as they get. This is the sort of thing that just somebody who'd never picked up a camera before wanted to take one to the beach could use, or a Boy Scout, for instance. These old box cameras were popular with them. This is comparable in today's terms to being like a smartphone. The same type of photography that was done with these would be done with a smartphone today. Cameras like these Brownies helped bring photography to large numbers of people in an affordable manner that had never been accessible to them before, and for that we owe modern photography almost in its entirety to Kodak Brownies and similar cameras. This was produced by Eastman Kodak in the US, Canada, and the UK from 1928 to 1935 in the UK. The whole production run of this model camera started in 1901 and ran until 1935. This was preceded by the original Brownie camera, and it was concurrent with myriad other Kodak Brownies and other Kodak cameras over its 35-year production run. But it was followed, insofar as I can tell, by nothing directly, because Kodak did not make another 120 box camera after this. If you have your Kodak Brownie number 2 Model E, let's take a look at it, and we will talk about what all of the different features and buttons are, and in a minute we will talk then about what they do. So on the top here we have the viewfinder window, and this is what you would use to sight up your image if you were taking a portrait photo. Here is your aperture selector, and you lift it to select either the smallest, medium, or largest aperture. It defaults to the largest aperture when it's set like this. This is your bulb and instant switch. When you raise it, your shutter fires in bulb mode. When you lower it, it fires in instant. Here's the handle, and this is the first one of these I've ever gotten that has an actual handle on it. And you can see there's a little bit of the Brownie imprint text right there. On the back here we have the back catch that allows you to open up the back of the camera to load and unload film. Here's the front of the camera. We have the viewfinder windows. This is for portrait orientation and this is for landscape. Here's the shutter window, and this is where the light will come in to get to the lens when you take a picture. On the camera's back we have the red window, and that's what you would use to count the number of frames that you've taken. Sometimes you could get a nameplate put into your camera, or embossed here you have number 120 film, use film number 120, the number 2 Brownie. Not all of them had this. And here is the maker's plate right there. Also not all of the cameras had that. Here's the camera's bottom. Typically these have nothing on them, but some of the later models had a tripod bushing or a hinge here for the back. You can see that this doesn't have a hinge, just a place where the leatherette is used as a hinge. So we'll take a look at the inside of the camera. Here on the back we have a couple of springs that help keep the film flat on plane. To take the inside of the camera out, we've got to pull out the film advance knob, and now we can access what is without a doubt the most Byzantine and counterintuitive film cradle I've ever seen. So if you've seen, or if you haven't seen, my Ansco 120 box camera video, here's what the cradle in that camera looks like. And it's too bad that it's not, that I know of, interchangeable with this Brownie, because it is significantly better. So let's take a look for a second. Here we have the Brownie one, Now, it is in some ways better made because it's metal instead of balsa wood. But this has some nice springs and a nicely shaped cup here that hold the film very well. This one has these flip-out hinges that look like some kind of terrible special effect in a Michael Bay movie. And then the ones for the bottom as well. But on the bottom, then this one has a key, but whereas these ones actually like stay in place, this one just flops around, making it exceedingly difficult to actually use and even harder to load and unload from a camera. So with this one, you just pop the film in and you're ready to go. So it's a very strange design that, quite frankly, doesn't really work very well. So I'll tell you what, while we've got this film cradle out, let's see how to even load film into this camera. So on the top, this is where the fresh roll of film is going to go. So that's easy enough. Just flip down these arms right here, put this in, put them back into place, and we can pull a leader off, and that's easy. So that's going to sit like that for a minute. Now let's get down to this bottom part. So I think I found part of what was going wrong with this camera that made it so hard to use. This was really floppy, so I bent it back into shape and hammered that nail in, and more optimistic now. But at any rate, once you have, or to put the, technically you should put this spool in before the other one, but to put it in, this side is exactly like up above, but this side has this key, and you have to make sure that the key fits into the spool end, and it does not really like the plastic spools as much as the metal ones. Now here's where things get really confusing, because this can rotate frontwards or backwards. Which way is it going to turn? So facing the film advance, it rotates counter or anti-clockwise, which means this is going to have to rotate counter or anti-clockwise. It's still a bit confusing, I won't lie. One thing you can do to help out just a little bit is partially spool this up before you load it into the cradle. There we go. That goes there, and then the key just fits in there. Okay. I'm going to turn this back over so that it lines up with the camera's take-up knob. And it still does not like to go in, but there it goes. Close this, and we'll advance it. There we go. You can see in the red window there, it's going to advance until the number 1 comes up. There we go, Kodak film number 1. And that is the easiest time I've had loading that yet. So now that the film's loaded, let's talk about how to take a picture with this camera. This is the way you're going to hold it, with your body up here and the lens up here. And you're going to take a look through the portrait or through the landscape window to sight up your image. Using a light meter or your best guess for your exposure, bearing in mind that this will always be about 1/50th of a second, you would either leave your aperture at its setting, make it one stop smaller, or even smaller. If you want to take a long exposure to obtain some long exposure effects, all that you have to do is lift up this to turn on bulb mode, or push it down to turn on instant mode. Now that you've got your image sighted and you know what your settings are and they're ready to go, you just have to flip the shutter switch in the opposite direction of the way that it currently rests. And each time you flip it one way or the other, it takes an exposure. So once you've flipped it once, then you start advancing the film until you get to frame number 2. And now we're ready to go back, sight up the next image, take the next image, and advance the film to frame number 3. And this is a 6x9, so it's going to take 8 photos per roll, and all you have to do is keep going through your roll of film until you've taken all 8 photos. So, some notes on this camera. This was the first ever camera model that used 120 roll film. And 120 is a format that is still made and used extensively today. In fact, in my opinion, I think it's the best film format ever invented. These are surprisingly robust cameras, and many of them are still usable today, even though they were made out of cardboard. I mean, that said, I gotta say, the images from this camera don't impress me one bit. They are just standard box camera on the low end of box camera quality. But the fact that this camera, which is exceedingly old, this is one of the older examples of these, still works and without flaw is amazing to me. And it says how important mechanical simplicity is to reliability. There are some things you do not want to do with your Kodak Brownie Kodak Brownie number 2 Model E 120 film camera. Do not touch the shutter. I mean, you can. It's not going to destroy it like it would a modern shutter. But in order to do that, you'd have to take the front panel off, and that can be a bit of a mess. I've done that before on these, and they're not always cooperative about going back together. So don't touch the mirrors in here if you take it apart to clean it, because they are surface-coated mirrors, and your finger oils can cause them to lose their reflectivity. Don't leave your camera in the car or because of the heat and the cold. It's not as bad as modern cameras that have oils that will get gummy or break down, but the heat could cause some of the glues in the cardboard or the cardboard itself to warp, ruining what is now becoming a more and more increasingly rare camera. Don't let this get wet because it is cardboard and it will warp and be ruined. And just remember that this is not a precision tool in the same way as other cameras that we've talked about in this video series, but they are still fun cameras to use, and they're venerable and starting to become quite fragile. So just remember, if you take care of your camera will take care of you. So if you have any questions, please leave them below. I'd be more than happy to answer them, and I try to get back pretty quickly. If you have any suggestions or thoughts, please leave those below as well. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do that wherever the button is when you're watching this video, and that will let you know when I have more camera and photography related videos to release. If you are an amateur photographer who has taken pictures with a 6x9 Brownie number 2, by all means feel free to share a link to your photos in the comments section. And one last thing, thank you guys for watching, and take great photos.